92 Winter Olympics, but the Tour de France is a game like no other. Three climbs comes 35 miles into today's race, a 5,300-foot fight up to the Col de Cézanne. First over the top was Peter de Klerk, followed by Franco Vona. Thankfully, they don't have to climb the tallest mountain in Europe, Mont Blanc, where this morning we all stopped and had our picture taken. Mont Blanc can be seen from 5 countries in Europe. There are 105 total miles of racetrack in today's Stage 18. 2 more tough days in the French Alps. Below, they'll see the Savoie Valley. The tough part is the 3 Category 1 climbs. Then they'll hustle through 2 sprints to the finish line in Cluses, which is named for the gorges that cut through the mountains and valleys. Best weather we have seen in the Alps. No fog they have to cut through, temperatures in the low 80s. Great day to follow the French roads with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin.
Well, unless you're riding in the Tour de France today, it is a most beautiful day here, and this indeed a most beautiful part of France in the Haute-Savoie. And the villages are looking pristine today. And this is Eric Breukink, having been joined now by Peter Ugrumov. At least he's been joined, Paul, by a strong man. I'm surprised, though, that Ugrumov has such a lot of strength and is still feeling so frisky after that long breakaway yesterday.
Well, he must have been very upset because he was the one who did most of the work in the breakaway there, and eventually he just got beaten at the end by Nelson Rodriguez. But this is the man who set the race on fire today. This is Arturas Kasputis, the man from Lithuania, who jumped clear just after the whole field came back together, because earlier on in the day there was a group of 14 riders went clear, and it all came back together just before the feeding station. And when we came to the bottom of the Col de Marais, this man here, Kasputis, jumped clear, and that's really what has started the fighting today.
Well, he came to the Tour on good form. He rides on perhaps the smallest team in the race, Chazal, but because it's a French team, the organisers played their card as being the host and let them ride the event. And Kasputis here came in good form. He won a stage of the Route du Sud, which is recognised as the last preparation race before the Tour de France, and finished 12th in that race. In fact, he won that race, I recall, back in 1992. But now Pascal Lino is launching an attack as well. So the Festina number 3 rider is now trying to draw some of the sting from the rest of that group.
Pascal Lino, the number 3 rider from the Festina squad, who for the last couple of days has been obliged to be the workman, the domestique of the team, and what a high-quality domestique he's been. And here you can see Eric Breukink really is suffering. He hasn't really shown the form and the class that he does possess. He can't stay with Ugrumov at all. Ugrumov in the distance there, moving clear. After an incredible ride yesterday, I'm astonished to see Ugrumov still got the force to get away in the mountains.
Well, he was outwitted yesterday by a rider who followed him all of the way until he saw the finish line, and then he jumped him and took the flag. That was Rodriguez. But Ugrumov is now trying to ride and continue his progress up the overall classification. And certainly he's not waiting to see what other riders do. He showed no fear at all of these 4 days in the Alps. There's Lino going clear very rapidly on this new col for the Tour, and moving clear quickly away from the field. And again, you see Miguel Indurain is just riding his own race. He sits there in the grandstand seats and watches everybody chase everybody else, and continues to keep his rhythm in as the group around him gets smaller.
Well, when you've got almost 10 minutes lead over the majority of your rivals, you can do that. And Miguel Indurain has played an excellent tactical race over the last few days, letting people like Pantani go clear, Luc Leblanc, Richard Virenque. He just watches them because he realizes that the other teams now are starting to worry about the 2nd and 3rd placings in the overall standings, the podium in Paris. So he lets their teams actually do the work, and it helps him rest his team a little bit.
Well, Lino here is 12th overall, and just over 20 minutes behind Indurain, and that's beginning to sound as though he's pretty close, because there are so many riders in this race now well outside the half hour behind Indurain, and many who are over 2 hours behind him on the course. You can see the pack on the right, and then our helicopter going down to the lone attackers here. The situation at the moment is that Ugrumov is now 2 minutes behind the leader on the road, Kasputis. Breukink has just been dropped by Ugrumov, so he's 2 minutes 10 seconds behind. Lino is 2 minutes 4 seconds behind, and the yellow jersey of Miguel Indurain and that big group are 3 minutes behind this rider here, Kasputis. And we're just on 50 kilometers, around 31 miles to go.
Which has us climbing the 2nd of those 3 Category 1 cols, which is French for the summit of a mountain. At this point, Marco Pantani is back 3 minutes behind the leader in the peloton. Now climbing up the 4,800 feet to the Col de la Coifferie, the world's greatest cyclists, including Team Festina's Pascal Lino. If this looks tough, just wait until tomorrow when in stage 19, the remaining riders compete in an individual time trial in the mountains. See it late tomorrow night at 1 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. Right now, however, it's time to climb with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin.
And as we are now 1 kilometre from the top of the Col de la Coifferie, you can see the capture is about to be made. Kasputis, who's led all the way up the climb, and Ugrimov has pursued him relentlessly. And he's going to catch him in sight of the line here. I wonder if he'll outsprint him as well for the prize at the top. He's getting out of the saddle, certainly, and Ugrimov is an inspired man once more today. So this hasn't been a terribly difficult climb. It's been a very fast climb on good roads. And Ugrimov broke clear and has gone well clear. Lino is still chasing, the Frenchman down below, but Virenque has almost been caught by the main field. And once we get to the top of this climb of the Coifferie, we plunge down to the Grand Bournon Valley, and then we will climb out via the Col de la Colombia. And my co-commentator Paul Sherwin has felt all the pain of that one.
I've been there a few times. Not only have I ridden it up on the bicycle, I actually ran up it for a bet one night because we used to go there with the La Redoute team when I raced several years ago for our training, cross-country training camp there.
It's an excellent valley, this, for all sorts of outdoor sports, and in fact some of the professional teams come down here to enjoy their pre-season training programs. Right now then, you can see the difference in the styles of these two as Kasputis just keeps to his rhythm, but the inspiration behind him is being dragged relentlessly to the summit. And Ugrimov today, I'm wondering if he's still annoyed about losing yesterday's stage.
He was very upset. You can see when he came up to the line, the last 100 meters, he was surprised that Nelson Rodriguez really came by him, I think, and he thought he had the possibility and the big chance of taking that mountain stage yesterday, and that's probably what motivated him this morning when he got up there.
So, two former top Soviet cyclists now representing their own countries, although in the Tour de France it's not the country but the team that counts. And Ugrimov here took one look across. They can speak to each other as well, which is unusual because they both speak the Russian language. And Ugrimov now being joined with another kick by Kasputis, as we now see the size of the crowd on top of this new climb here.
This is a great move by Ugrimov because, in fact, if he can stay with Kasputis, they'll need an awful lot of help on the descent. Pascal Lino is chasing quite hard, but he's still somewhat like a minute and a half behind Ugrimov. So I'm quite sure that Kasputis and Ugrimov are going to work together well on the descent, and maybe they'll try and stay together on the next part of the climb. But the Col de la Colombia is a very tough climb, especially when you get to the top, the town called Chinaillon. It really kicks up as we go then over the top, and then they're going to plunge straight down into Cluses.
And there's the face of Ugrimov, always appears to be suffering all kinds of pain, yet he rides so quickly. And the crowd enjoying the warm sunny weather up here today. And I wonder if, as we get towards the end, we're going to see yet another run for gold by Marco Pantani. But you were telling me earlier, Paul, that you had heard that his knee, injured yesterday, was badly swollen this morning.
It didn't look very good at the start this morning, and it was very swollen. The doctor said that he had some kind of a stretch in one of his muscles as well, although earlier on, further down this climb, he was still in contention riding alongside Miguel Indurain. But at the top of the climb, Ugrimov goes over in first place, followed by Kasputis, and they're going to plunge down now and try and increase their lead over Pascal Lino, this man here, who's third on the road at the moment.
So the Festina team from Andorra, but they have a number of Frenchmen on the squad, and I tell you what, the French have come back in this year's Tour de France with some very promising young riders indeed. And I think they were rattled by the very poor press they had received to say that French cycling was finished. We can't produce riders to win our own race anymore. Well, they gave their answer this year, and this is turning out to be one of their most aggressive tours for years. And Lino now, the only man to win a stage for France last year down in the south, and that was at Perpignan, is now on the attack again and looking to improve his overall position today, which is 12th on the list. There he goes, and he's closing fast now. He really has found his legs. 50 seconds the gap now. He was 2 minutes down not very long ago.
Piotr Ugrimov has to be pleased at this point. After yesterday, he led to the finish, only be outsprinted by Nelson Rodriguez. Back in the peloton, Virenque, the rest of the leaders, and somewhere Marco Pantani.
Here's what's left. It's approximately 10 riders being led by Marco Pantani and Miguel Indurain, Roberto Conti, They're 4 minutes 15 seconds down, Paul, and that means Ugramov is second overall on the road right now.
Just by a couple of seconds, because he started the day 4 minutes and 13 seconds back in 6th place, 4 minutes and 13 seconds back on 2nd place in the overall standings. But this is the man now who's trying to do the damage a little bit further down the mountain here. Vladimir Pulnikov did the work. He pushed them along. He really set the pace extremely well. I think there's been a few words from the team manager of the Carrera squad between Pulnikov and Marco Pantani to sort themselves out. Pulnikov did an excellent job, and now Marco Pantani is trying to put the pressure on again to get rid of the two French riders, to get rid of Richard Virenque and Luc Leblanc, but at the moment he hasn't actually reached the steeper part of the climb, and then he must accelerate again to try and do the damage.
Well, what a marvellously exciting rider Pantani is. I think this man, you know, may turn out to have the ability to win a Tour de France. He's only 24, despite his bald head. He's got a lot of tours in those legs. He's a pure climber. I spoke to Sean Yates this morning, who was absolutely mesmerised by the way he rode the mountains yesterday. He referred to the gears he used, of using the big chain wheel when they were all on the small chain wheels. And he said he was absolutely very much a pure man for the mountains. Well, sorry, a little bit about our picture breakup again here in the atmospheric conditions in the Alps. As you can see, a marvellous crowd has come to the Alps today. We're in very much the holiday area of France, in the Haute-Savoie. But Luc Leblanc is anxious to get to the front. I think he'll probably slow Pantani down a bit. Indurain just sits there and follows the wheels, and again he's coming through a day in the Alps where he's not turning a pedal in anger.
Well, Luc Leblanc moved to the front there, just I think to try a psychological move on Pantani and say, look, Richard Virenque and myself are in pretty good shape. You don't need to think about attacking again. But he didn't manage to stay at the front for very long before Big Mig comes to the front himself to set the tempo. Now it's Roberto Conti's turn, the rider in the pink and blue jersey from the Lampre squad, the man who won the giant of the Alpe d'Huez. But very soon, I feel Marco Pantani will try again, because it's his accelerations that nobody can actually respond to.
Well, that's what makes a good climber. They can go so quickly, and so quickly they can up the ante a bit, and that acceleration, in fact, has reduced this group, which was 12, to what you can see here, which I think is around 6 riders. Richard Virenque there with his jersey unzipped. As we now go up here to the leader again. And in fact, this man showing no signs at all, Ugramov, of slowing down on the climb today. And once he does get to the top of the Col de la Colombière, well, he's got a nice, cool 20 minutes all downhill with hardly an uphill road on it into Cluses below. And that will be a good feeling for him, and he will richly deserve the stage victory, which he was robbed of yesterday by the little Colombian Nelson Rodriguez.
Well, in fact, that's a very strange thing happened there. Luc Leblanc tried to attack, and something went wrong with his bicycle straight away, because I can hear the race referee shouting for the Festina car, which I feel is in the front. In fact, Luc Leblanc is stopped in the side of the road there, and he has a major problem with his bicycle.
So LeBlanc, we don't know what's happened there. I don't think maybe he's jammed his gears up, Paul, but of course the Benesto team car of Indurain is going to do nothing about it. They're waiting for the arrival of Festina's team car.
Well, he managed to get going again. In fact, he's very fortunate that he managed to rectify the problem himself, because the team car is in front of him on the road at the moment with Pascalino, who is 3 minutes and 18 seconds behind Pietro Ugramov. It must just be in the gears jumped, and he managed to put them back on. He's on the big chain ring at the moment, trying to get back into contact, but he's conceding an awful lot of time.
And this is Lino passing now a very, very tired Casputis, who started the move today and then was caught on the climb of the Croix Free by Ugramov, and left there as well.
Was trying to grab the spotlight from Marco Pantani in front of thousands of fans.
And this rider, who's only ridden the Tour de France once before, by the way, and that was back in 1990 when he finished 45th overall. But this rider is a class performer, believe me. He won a stage of the Tour of Italy last year when he gave Indurain a real run for his money. Indurain beat him overall by less than a minute, and Ugramov finished second. And now he's come back to his old form in this year's Tour de France. And has he enjoyed this week in the Alps?
Well, everybody said the last week of the Tour de France was going to be the toughest, and it certainly has been. I've never seen such a week of mountains concentrated in the last week of the Tour de France, and Ugramov obviously knew that. He bared it in mind. We hardly saw him in the first 10 days of this Tour de France, and now we're coming to the climax of the Tour. Ugramov is taking advantage of the tired bodies of all the other riders in this year's event.
he's about to go over the top of the climb, and then it's all downhill to Cluses. He'll take a few risks, I think, because he's not going to be robbed of a stage victory today if he has anything to do with it all. There's the banner, signifying really to the last major climb in this year's Tour de France, although we have the mountain time trial tomorrow. Avoriaz doesn't hold any real fears because the riders who are out of the competition will ride up it, while only the big men will have to race up it to try and make sure of a place in Paris. So this is really goodbye to the major climbs in the Alps today, and Ugramov goes over the summit. The clock starts now, and if he's got a minute or so, and I think he's got more than that, if he's got 3 minutes on the yellow jersey, Paul, he must survive to the end.
Well, I think he'll have more than that. The last time check I got was he had over 3 minutes lead on Pascal Lino, who is now lying second on the road at the moment, and Lino is a long way down the climb, and 3 minutes 45 seconds was the gap to the yellow jersey group, and I don't think they're going to pull up that much time on him as we get up to the top of the climb here. All he has to do is take it reasonably carefully down the descent, because the descent of the Col de la Colombière is actually quite tricky. There are 1 or 2 corners there which are very gravelly, and it's quite easy to lose your holding and go over the edge, and that's what we would not like to see happen to Pietro Ugramov. In fact, Lino is falling away more rapidly now, 3 minutes 35 seconds.
And this is the strap going on, and again we've got an attack here. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think Luc Leblanc has got back and gone forward and attacked, and we never saw him came back. Our cameras with the leader, but that is Leblanc. He's anxious to get this action going because, of course, he's losing his place overall, which is 4th today. But Virenque is losing his 2nd place. Pantani is losing his 3rd place. They're all going to drop down 1 if Ugramov holds that advantage out on the road.
Well, that was a great comeback, because he really must have been a very worried man at the time there, and now he's using an excessively large gear. In fact, he said towards the end of yesterday's stage he actually felt as if he blew up. He was in a very bad day, and now he's using a monster gear to try and get rid of Marco Pantani, the man who leapt over him in the overall standings yesterday up to 3rd. And there's been quite a fight over the last couple of kilometres between Pantani, Virenque and Luc Leblanc. This at the back is Escartin, number 15 from the May class team, and he's really suffering to stay in contact there.
But he's up here, Paul, and there are those who thought he might win today on the last day in the Alps, but of course he hasn't quite managed to do that because Ugramov has gone clear. But Escartin is hanging on to the back of a very select group of riders, the names we've called every day here in the mountains of the Alps. And Luc Leblanc has suffered every day in the Alps too, but he's never given up. He's setting the pace again now, trying to limit the gains of Ugramov. Pantani in a strong position, but I think, you know, his knee has given him a little bit of trouble today, because in fact he's stood around at and near the front. He's tried 1 or 2 of his famous accelerations, but he hasn't shaken off anybody. But don't forget too, he's now become a heavily marked man after his ride yesterday by Indurain himself. And Indurain has paid much more attention to Pantani today than he has done until now.
I have to admit that I do feel that that crash he had yesterday did affect his form for today, because the knee was really swollen this morning. It may well have taken a little bit of the sting out of his attack. As we look down here, it looks as if they've actually swept up Pascal Lino in the last kilometre of the climb there.
So they come smoothly up to the finish of the hill, and Luc Leblanc is sprinting up towards the banner, looking for his teammate Richard Virenque in the polka dot to come round him and take the points. I'm not sure whether Virenque can do that now, and in fact Pascal Lino just trying to limit his losses up towards that banner. He's been out in front until he was caught just now, and I should think he'll get back onto the pack as they go over the top. And Indurain himself is going to sprint up towards the summit. Richard Virenque on his wheel. I'm not sure whether Richard can actually get round Big Mig here, but he's going to have a little go. And we come up to the summit, and in fact he decided not to bother. Indurain goes over the top in 2nd place. 3:30 down is the time gap with this select little group of riders.
Phil, what goes up must come down. Sometimes it's 70 miles per hour. I don't see any guardrails there, do you? Back in a moment. 1/4 inch of rubber comes in contact with the road as Miguel Indurain races down the mountain at 70 miles per hour. They get 2 more tires, but the same kind of speed. Another kind of racing a long way from France tonight at 8 Eastern on ESPN. Thursday Night Thunder, USAC Midget Racing, Raceway Park in Indianapolis, Indiana. Let's go back to Phil and Paul.
Well, now behind Pantani here, that familiar style of his on the way down, but when our camera can get up there, I can tell you now that Miguel Indurain has gone for it on his own off the top of this mountain. He is doing a suicidal descent down here, Paul.
Well, I don't think it's quite suicidal. Miguel Indurain is a superb descender in his own right. He's up in the ranks with somebody like Sean Yates. And you see at the front here, he's taking his own line around the corner. In fact, he's putting a lot of pressure onto the other riders in this group, like Richard Virenque, who has almost made contact with him there, and also Marco Pantani. But a man who will be suffering on this descent at the moment is Luc Leblanc, who's not really a very good descender.
Well, Pantani's making a desperate rush at Indurain here to try and get on terms with him. This is a 12-mile drop off the mountain, and we run straight out into Cluses itself, where the crowd are waiting to see the race come up the main street. And Pantani trying now to get up to Miguel Indurain. And there is Richard Virenque and Indurain, first and second overall this morning in the Tour de France. But of course, Richard Virenque in danger of losing that and getting a little bit desperate about it. He's got his place on the Champs-Élysées at the end of the Tour as the King of the Mountains winner. But of course, he wants to be second in the Tour de France, and he's French, and I think that would be a marvellous moment for him.
He really is a courageous little rider, because the last couple of days he's had a mano with Miguel Indurain over the top of one or two of these mountains. In fact, Indurain is the one who started making the descent so rapidly, and once Virenque caught him, he went straight by and said, "Look, Miguel, I'm not such a bad little chap either."
It costs an awful lot of nerve to go down at something round about 80 to 90 kilometers an hour on these descents. They brake hard. And hats off to our motorcycle cameraman here, who, looking through the lens, must get one or two nasty moments as they go down behind the riders.
Those riders, Phil, the greatest pros in the sport. And as we watch them, we're reminded that some of us are more amateur at this sport than others. Some in the States have organized their own tours de Europe, and Arlan McCarron is breaking away with them. Members of Team Gone to drop out. Tour rules state that you cannot race as a team with less than 3 riders. If one more abandons, they have to drop their team name. Back to our team of Phil and Paul.
So just ahead of Pantani here is a Big Mig, Miguel Indurain, as news reaches us that Luc Leblanc, chasing just behind, has punctured, and the service car trying to help him out there. But it's often a problem on these descents because the rims get so hot when the riders are braking hard and then kicking out of the corners that they're blowing their tyres now. And Pantani having a real struggle here. That's his familiar riding style. He puts his tummy on the saddle, tucks right down, and tries to get maximum speed out of that machine on the descent.
Now, this is Luc Leblanc in the back of the field here. He's obviously got a fairly quick change off the Festina team car now, but I think probably the problem with Luc Leblanc there was he took too many risks trying to stay in contact, and he maybe hit a stone, and then that's it. He had a fat tire, but fortunately for him, he got a very quick wheel change, and at the front of the race here, you see Marco Pantani, not one of the most aerodynamic riders in the main field, is having a great deal of difficulty trying to stay in contact with Miguel Indurain. You can just see him from there, and Richard Virenque.
Well, it's not often we ever get these pictures on the long descents of the Tour de France, and they're quite dizzy, aren't they, as we go down. 9 kilometers to go. That's a little over 5 miles to finish. We briefly saw the leader there, Peter Ugramov, and the last time check we had on him was that 3 minutes 30 seconds over the top of the Col de la Colombière, and that would be good enough for 3rd place, I think, at the moment, Paul.
It would be very good for him as well, because he's actually done a great job moving up in the overall standings at the moment. You see Virenque here is putting the pressure on, actually working with Miguel Indurain at the moment, because he doesn't want Marco Pantani to come back, because there is still a big battle in this Tour de France for 2nd and 3rd place, 2 places on the podium in Paris. And you see Marco Pantani is 100 meters behind, which is why those 2 riders are working at the front.
Well, many people have said, you know, what a great tour this will be without Miguel Indurain, because the other riders are so equally matched on ability. But of course, what we have seen this year is a man at the height of his profession and doing it so well. He actually laid the killer blows in just 47 miles of the 2,000 or so we've ridden this year, and that was 7 miles up the climb of Hautacam, and of course the 40 miles time trial. And ever since then, through the Alps, he's just observed everybody and rather enjoyed at times, I think, the scrappy scene going on between the riders of different teams. And now we're seeing here the battle, which is really for 2nd place, between Richard Virenque, Peter Ugramov ahead, and Marco Pantani. And Indurain getting mixed up in it now, and just keeping out of trouble by leading the charge down this descent.
Twice today. Sometimes this is just plain bad luck. Sometimes these riders make mistakes when they get so exhausted. Now the Michelin race summary. Armand de las Cuevas was a challenger for second, has now collapsed and abandoned. Piotr Ugrimov for the second straight day can finish first. Marco Pantani, however, has been kept under control by Miguel Indurain. Now back to the race where a great duel is developing.
Well, we're up behind Miguel Indurain here, and the latest time check coming through at 3 minutes 10 seconds. As we switch back to Luc Leblanc, he still has a problem with that back brake, and this certainly isn't the time to have problems with your brakes on the way down the Col de la Colombière. He's already punctured once, he's had a wheel, he had a problem going up when his team car wasn't with him. They were up behind Pascal Lino, and so the neutral service tried to help him out. He's at 10 kilometres from the finish, and we're about 9 kilometres from the line with these two, but of course ahead of them by 3 minutes and 10 seconds is Piotr Ugrimov. Well, this is the scene back on the top of the Col de la Colombière, and our little man in green, rather, on the far right is Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov. We'll be seeing him again on the Champs-Élysées, I have no doubt about that, trying to win the stage, as he did a couple of years ago, and of course that terrible crash he had a couple of years ago there as well when he was winning the green jersey. He's aiming for a third victory in that competition, and it's looking pretty good.
Well, these two riders have still got a great gap on Marco Pantani. He's just been joined by Roberto Conti and I think by Escartine, the Mapei rider, as well on the descent. They're about 150 meters behind, so Richard Virenque is increasing his lead ahead of Marco Pantani at the moment, but these two riders are not making hardly any impression at all on the lead of Piotr Ugrimov.
And now let's join the leader at 4 kilometres from the finish. Piotr Ugrimov is riding today to victory, and having ridden such a wonderful day yesterday and was beaten in the sprint, no one would have thought he would have had the strength to go for it all again today. And it looks as though, in fact, Miguel Indurain is backing off a little bit here, because he's finding that the enthusiasm of Virenque is not worth taking too many risks.
Well, that's the most intelligent thing to do. I think Richard Virenque is really trying to show Miguel Indurain he can take the corners faster than he can. Indurain being intelligent enough to back off a little bit and let the Frenchman take all the risks if he wants to, because he daren't risk a crash at this stage of the game. We're 4 days away from Paris, and he just realizes that the Tour de France, fourth victory for him, is just around the corner almost. So he's letting Virenque set the pace around the corners now, and that little Frenchman is really taking the risks. He's going to right on the inside angle of the corners there, and he's using all the road that he can.
He has matured in one Tour de France, Richard Virenque, this year. He was briefly a yellow jersey leader in the Tour a couple of years ago, but my goodness me, he's come good this time. He's gained his strength ever since he won that stage at Les Ardennes in the Pyrenees, and now he's certain to win the King of the Mountains competition when he gets to Paris. The roads are getting flatter for the leader as we start to run now into the finish at Cluses, and Piotr Ugrimov is going to get the stage win he so richly deserves. It'll be his first ever stage win in a Tour de France. It's only his second tour anyway. His first one was back in 1990.
You see here our Indurain rides about 10 or 15 meters off the back of Richard Virenque, just so that he can watch the line that the little Frenchman's taking round the corners. But this is the man who's done the great ride today. After being defeated so narrowly yesterday, I didn't think he'd be able to have the energy to come back and fight, but he really has done a great job.
And Virenque working now with Indurain, and that must be a great feeling. There aren't many can work with Indurain. Inside 3 kilometres for the leader on the course, Ugrimov, as Indurain now just rides a very steady race down towards the finish, and there'll be a sprint here between Virenque and Indurain.
That will be a strange sprint as well, because they've had a couple of men against men battles over the last few days.
Paul, just yesterday at the finish line on Val Thorens, Richard Virenque going all out, just edged out Indurain. Feisty move. Finish line is coming up.
Kilometres to go now for the yellow jersey. So there's about a 2 kilometre gap between the yellow jersey and the polka dot jersey, and indeed the leader on the course today.
This is the group with Marco Pantani, who's lying in third place in that group at the moment. They're about 30 seconds behind the group of Miguel Indurain and Richard Virenque, so he's lost a little bit of time over his young French rival, and that would be good for the Frenchman, because I'm not sure that he has the strength when it comes to the time trial to rival Marco Pantani on that final climb up to Avoriaz, which is going to be very tough. There's going to be a great battle tomorrow in that time trial for second and third place in the overall standings.
Well, and by the way, we've had Armand de las Cuevas not start this morning, as I told you earlier. Also, we know of at least 4 riders who have abandoned the race today, so the dropouts continue. 4 kilometers to go now for the remnants of this leading group.
I think we're getting a chance there to have a look at Luc Leblanc, who's also suffering to get back into contact with Marco Pantani's group. But this is the man who's the man of the day, Piotr Ugrimov, in the streets here of Cluses.
And so he's got the win he so richly deserves, this man who tried yesterday with a race-long breakaway and was then beaten in the sprint. Now he's got rid of everybody today. He's done it all on his own too. He crossed to the leader, Arturas Kasputis, on his own, and then once on the lower slope of the Col de la Colombière, he broke clear. And that indeed was a great way to win the stage. The man of the Alps, with the exception possibly of Marco Pantani, but this man in 2 days has had a second and now a first. A great win for Piotr Ugrimov, and I think the clock will tell us, of course, he's certainly going to climb up to 4th. He might even be 3rd overall by the end of the day.
Here's the 2 Festina riders, Pascal Lino and Luc Leblanc, almost getting into contact with Marco Pantani, who I feel is just in front there where we see the team cars of the other riders.
And now we're watching out for what will be a very interesting sprint here between the yellow jersey, Miguel Indurain, and the polka dot jersey of Richard Virenque. And they've had quite a battle over these last couple of days. Indurain annoying Virenque by going for the King of the Mountains points, and then Virenque getting his own back at the finish. And Virenque at the moment having to race hard right up to the line because he doesn't want to lose his 2nd place overall in this race to Piotr Ugrimov. So seconds will count, although I think Paulie's safe. He won't know that.
He won't know that because at the moment the team car from the Festina squad is a little bit further back trying to help Luc Leblanc, so he really doesn't know what the time gap is at the moment. He knows all he has to do, though, is to race for the line to save as much time as possible. A little flick of the wrist and he says, come on, Miguel, please give me a hand because I'm starting to suffer here quite a bit. And this rider, Virenque, really has matured in the Tour de France this year. He's come from being a rider who was regarded as a flash in the pan when he took the yellow jersey for a day a couple of years ago, to now being a mature challenger, possibly for overall victory in the Tour de France in a couple of years' time.
Well, it's 1 kilometre to go, and it's over a minute and a half now since Ugrimov finished. And so there's approximately another minute and 20 seconds before these two get in, but that will keep Virenque happily ensconced in 2nd place. Indurain, of course, isn't too worried because the man nearest to him is right in front of him there, Richard Virenque, so he'll keep the same lead on him tonight. This is the chase down. It's Pantani at the back, who it's very, very close to him losing his 3rd place overall.
We had a tough day there on the descent there. He really couldn't stay in contact with these riders for a long time. He was just 100 meters behind them, but then he just was unable to make contact. But that is a disadvantage of being a light climber.
Now this will be a very interesting sprint, but it looks as though Miguel Indurain has got the advantage. He's manoeuvred the young man in front of him. What a big man he is, isn't he, Miguel Indurain?
Virenque was really hurting there. He was pushing himself all the way to the line, and Big Mig takes it over now.
And just look at the way he kicks to the line. He's going to put a second into Richard Virenque, I think, in this sprint finish for the line. A perfect straight line, and he'll sit up, I think, in a minute because he knows he's got it. There it is. And he'll just cruise in for 2nd place, 2 minutes and 39 seconds down. And Virenque gets 3rd slot. But that's okay. Richard will keep his 2nd place overall, as well as Indurain stays in yellow. This now is the battle, though, to see whether Ugrimov will move up into 3rd place overall. He's got to finish within the next 20 seconds from now. If he's in 20 seconds, he will conserve 3rd place, and the sprint has started, so it looks as though he'll be okay as Escartin comes up to the line to take the sprint. And Pantani behind him, followed by Conti. It's going to be desperately close, in fact. 23 is the time, and you know, I think indeed Pantani will drop a place and Ugrimov will climb to 4th. When we work it all out, I think it'll be by a single second.
Phil, well-deserved win for Piotr Ugrimov, who tried so hard for 2 days, gets the win today. Back in a moment. In today's stage 18, a lot of people were really pulling for Piotr Ugrimov after yesterday's second-place finish behind the opportunist Nelson Rodriguez. After he stepped down off the podium, we had a chance to ask him if this was revenge for yesterday's finish behind Rodriguez, and he said yes, most beautiful revenge. Are you mad at Rodriguez? Certainly, yes, really mad. And on tomorrow's mountain time trial, it will be another day of exhaustion. Now, don't forget Marco Pantani. Miguel Indurain and Richard Virenque certainly didn't. There was a decisive moment for Marco today, and he told us after the race that on the descent into town, he was 10 meters behind Indurain and Virenque. They looked at each other, saw he was behind, they looked back at him, and they attacked him in turn. Basically, they ganged up on him. The stage results, Ugrimov in 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 19 seconds covers the 105 miles. He beat Richard Virenque by a second at the finish line, but maybe more importantly, Marco Pantani did not pick up any time on Miguel Indurain.